So, okay, well, here we are, and we're going to continue our discussion on Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Last time we had done the first part, and we'll be doing part 2, or the second fit, beginning now. And you will notice that Sir Gawain now is going to be ready to go out, well, as ready as he's ever going to be. He's going to be ready now to go out on his journey, his quest journey, for the Knight of the Green Chapel, or Green Knight, and he's going to be honor bound to kneel before him and take the blow, whatever blow the Green Knight gives him with his axe. Remember now that in the first part, toward the end of the first part, Gowing struck the Green Knight in the neck with the large axe, and he cut off his head. But at the very end of the story, the Green Knight goes over, he retrieves his head, the head continues to talk, and he bids his farewell to Arthur's court and says that he will meet Sir Gawain at the Green Chapel a year hence, and he goes riding off. And this reminds you of what other story? Do you know another story with a headless horseman? Anybody remember, like in American literature? The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, yes, 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 yes. In which you have another character who is a headless horseman and so forth. I'm not saying that there's any direct line of influence here, but you know, this is a story which is not that uncommon, by the way, as it's spread around the world, mainly in folkloric versions. So, a year has passed, or nearly a year has passed, and in part 2, the 1, 2, 3, the third stanza, and we're now at line 536, till All Hallows Day with Arthur he dwells, okay? But now he's going to begin to get himself together. We hear of other knights of the Round Table who are going to bid him well in 551 and following, Yvain and Eric, Sir Dodonald le Sauvage, the Duke of Clarence, Lionel and Lancelot and Lucan the Good, Sir Bors, Sir Bedivere, Mador de la Porte, and so forth. So we have the full complement of the Knights of the Round Table, at least at this particular moment, who are there to see him off. And then in the next stanza, the one which begins in 566, we have the arming of the knight. Now this is something which is traditional in epic, for example, in the Iliad. Any of you read the Iliad? In Homer's Iliad, we have the arming of who? Anybody remember? We have the arming of Achilles, and we have a very elaborate description of the shield of Achilles, which is one of the most famous such descriptions in ancient classical literature. And so also in the medieval romances, the same convention is carried over with a traditional scene in which we have the arming of the knight who is now going to go out on his quest to do battle if necessary and to face uncertain dangers. Well, then we go on until we have the stanza which begins in 619, in which we have the Pentangle on Sir Gawain's shield. So if we can go to the tablet, please, Scott. And let me draw the pentangle. Let's see here. The pentangle would go more or less like this. Remember doing these when you were a kid? Okay, the star is a pentangle. Penta is the Greek word for 5, as in pentagon and so forth. And so we have a 5-pointed star. And this is the symbol of the pentangle. And you'll notice that this takes on a religious significance. It's not only a kind of device which is supposedly going to protect the Green Knight, but it also has a Christian religious significance, as we learn in the next stanza, the one that begins in line 640. This is fixed on the 5 wounds of Christ on the cross, as the Creed tells. We have the 5 joys of the Queen of Heaven, the Blessed Virgin Mary, and so on and so on and so on. So, we also learn that that Sir Gawain is the Blessed Virgin's own knight. And that's going to be important in the scenes in which Gowing is the object of the hunt, the seduction, by the lady of Bersalac's or Bertolac's court. It's spelled both ways, by the way. Well, there's a certain criticism from the court in the stanza that begins in line 670, because after all, one wonders, does he really need to go out? And wasn't this really just a game? And, need he take it so seriously when now the game itself has turned very, very serious, the consequences of which could be fatal to Sir Gawain? Well, he nevertheless rides off because he believes that he is honor-bound to do so. And in 691 and following, notice he rides in his array through the realm of Logres. And this is, as the footnote points out, one of the names for Arthur's kingdom. And if you have some sense of the geography of England, let me show you roughly where this is. Let me take off the pentangle. And let's see, if we have, I need to do this first, okay. If we have, this is terrible drawing, I know, but don't worry about that. I'm just giving you an idea. Okay, so if we assume that this is England over here and Ireland is over here, actually Ireland comes down a little bit farther than that. And so we would have London, roughly right about here. We would have Canterbury roughly right out here. We would have the Scottish border coming roughly in here. And then over in this area is Wales. And Logres would be right around in here, as well as we can tell from the geography that we are given. Okay? And clearly this is a kind of mythical kingdom of Arthur. We're not talking about something which is historically verifiable. Okay, so he rides in his array through the realm of Logres, Sir Gawain, God knows, though it gave him small joy. All alone must he lodge through many a long night, where the food that he fancied was far from his plate. And notice again the alliterative patterns here, because as I said in our last segment, this is during the alliterative revival. The alliterative revival. He had no mate but his mount, over mountain and plain, nor man to say his mind to, but Almighty God, till he had wandered well nigh into North Wales. North Wales. Have any of you ever been to Wales, to North Wales in particular? Anybody here? No world travelers? Not yet, anyway. Okay. Sorry?
I've been to South Wales.
South Wales. South Wales is pretty flat. North Wales is where all the mountains are. And it's very mountainous, and at least in the Middle Ages, it was very heavily wooded. Now, much of the woods are gone because of strip mining that took place for a very long time. But in any event, he is now going into North Wales. All the islands of Anglesey he holds to his left. Anglesey is a large island off the northwest coast of Wales. And there was a famous castle and stronghold there. So he holds that to his left, and he's following the coast. Comes over at Holyhead and enters next the wilderness of Wirral. So he's coming up along the coast, following the coastline across the northern part of Wales until he comes to the wilderness of Wirral. And notice what the footnote says. Went from Camelot north to the northern coast of Wales, opposite the islands of Anglesey. There he turned east toward the Dee, which is a river, to the forest of Wirral in Cheshire. So he apparently comes out of Wales into that little bit of England, which is between Scotland and Wales. And that appears to be more or less where the castle of Bersalach and his lady would be found. By the way, this is also Celtic territory, isn't it? The Welsh, right? As well as the peoples of the southwestern part of England, particularly down in Cornwall. This is all Welsh, this is all Celtic territory. The Welsh speak a Celtic tongue. The people of Cornwall and thereabouts spoke a Celtic tongue, which was similar to Welsh and a cousin language of Irish and Scots Gaelic. So, once again, we have a reinforcement of the theory that the Arthurian legends, which developed into these great romances in the Central and later Middle Ages, go back to some kind of Celtic origins, though it's difficult for us to trace all of the sequence of events. So, notice at the end of the next stanza, this is down around line 733 and 4, in peril and pain and predicaments dire, he rides across country to Christmas Eve. And notice what's happening to him along the way. I mean, this is the middle of winter. It is cold. He's out in the snow, in the ice, the frost. There are vicious animals around, as they would not all have been hunted into extinction at this early time. And he comes across the country to Christmas Eve, our night, and at that holy tide, he prays with all his might that Mary, remember now his devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, as signified by the Pentangle on his shield, that Mary may be his guide till a dwelling comes in sight. And so he makes his way until in the stanza beginning in line 763, no sooner had he signed himself thrice, signed with the sign of the cross 3 times. Then he was ware in the wood of a wondrous dwelling. Aha! The castle appears. And the castle seems to appear as if by magic, because it wasn't there before, or at least he wasn't able to observe it before. And there appears to be some kind of a connection, not only with magic, but also with the very action of signing himself with the sign of the cross. A wondrous dwelling within a moat on a mount, bright amid boughs of many a tree great of girth that grew by the water, a castle as comely as a knight could own, on grounds fair and green, in a goodly park. This is all in contrast to the wintry surroundings that he's been passing through up to this point. Well, finally he goes up to the castle, and a porter challenges him, just as we saw in Beowulf. The Coast Guard challenged Beowulf and his men. And this is in lines 8, 11, and following. Good sir, said Gowing, wouldst go to inquire if your lord would allow me to lodge here a space? Peter, in other words, by St. Peter, said the porter, for my part, I think so noble a knight will not want for a welcome. Notice how Gowing is welcomed according to the laws of hospitality. And so the Lord himself, toward the end of that stanza, comes down from his chamber to welcome the guest. Now, the rules of hospitality are going to be extremely important throughout this story. Gowing, in the next stanza, gazed on the host that greeted him there, and a lusty fellow he looked, the lord of that place. By the way, lusty in its older sense didn't mean the same thing as it does in our time, where it's come to have more sexual connotations. But it didn't really have those connotations then. It simply means here is somebody who is full of life and strength and vigor. So we have a description of the host, a man of massive mold. He's a very large and muscular man, and of middle age. Well, we don't know what middle age really meant at this time, because, as I've talked about here before, life expectancies were different than they are now. But certainly this is a mature adult man. This is no kid. Broad, bright was his beard, of a beaver's hue, strong, steady in his stance, upon stalwart shanks, his face fierce as fire, fair spoken withal, and well suited he seemed in Sir Gowing's sight to be a master of men in a mighty keep. Well, okay. Then we learn in the following stanza, beginning in line 875, how Gowing is treated. Again, notice the laws of hospitality. Couch before the fire, where fresh coals burned, they spread for Sir Gowing splendidly now with quilts, quaintly stitched, and cushions beside, and so forth. Well, okay. He's going to be brought to a table to have some wine and some kind of refreshment. And so we have in the next stanza there, beginning with line 901, then at times and by turns as table he sat, they questioned him quietly with queries discreet, and he courteously, notice the emphasis on courtesy, because he is like Chaucer's knight, marked by his courtesia. And he courteously confessed that he comes from the court and owns him of the brotherhood of high famed Arthur, the right royal ruler of the Round Table. And the guest by their fireside is Gowing himself, who has happened on their house at that holy feast. It's Christmas time, right? When the name of the knight was made known to the Lord, then loudly he laughed, so elated he was. Well, there's a certain irony here, isn't there? This is often called a dramatic irony. And the irony is in the Lord of the Castle laughing in recognition of Sir Gawain. Now, what's the irony in that? Who is this Lord? Who do we find out later on is this Lord? Press your button, please. Okay.
Green Knight.
So the Lord of the Castle is going to turn out to be the Green Knight, right? Yeah. Okay. So this, as it happens, is the same guy who was in Arthur's court a year earlier, right? And he's the one who cut off, or had his head cut off by Sir Gawain. And so now Sir Gawain comes and he announces himself by name, and the Lord laughs in recognition. Okay, he's not laughing at him. He's laughing in a joyful manner. Well, okay, so notice that in 933, the Lord is there alone. His fair lady sits in a comely closet, secluded from sight. The older meaning of the word closet, we're going to see this again in Shakespeare's Hamlet, is an enclosed room. An enclosed room. Usually a bedroom or a bedchamber of some kind. But it doesn't mean closet in our sense of one of those little places where you hang your clothes. Okay, so now Gowing comes in gay attire, and then the lady appears in 940 and following. The lady that longed to look on the knight came forth from her closet with her comely maids. The fair hues of her flesh, her face and her hair, and her body and her bearing were beyond praise, and excelled the queen herself, as Sir Gawain thought. Aha! She's even more beautiful than Queen Guinevere, as he thought, but notice he keeps his thoughts to himself. He goes forth to greet her with gracious intent. Another lady led her by the left hand that was older than she. Now, we later on learn that this older woman plays a very important role in the plot. Who is this older woman, by the way? Anybody know? Yeah. Don't forget your button.
Her name is
Morgan Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay. Fay is the French word for fairy, as in the fairy people. You know, in Celtic mythology and Celtic lore, the fairy people who come from beyond and have magical powers. And there are moments at which they can enter into our world, by the way, often performing acts of mischief. Sometimes they can even be dangerous, by the way. So this is Morgan Le Fay, and we're going to find out more about her relationship to Arthur and therefore to the court a little bit later on. But does anybody know, just offhand? Yeah, did you press your button?
She's Arthur's half-sister.
Arthur's half-sister, that's right. And she has an old grudge against Arthur. And so part of what is happening here is that she is putting Bercelac and Lady Bercelac up to the trick in order to embarrass Arthur and his court through embarrassing their principal knight, Sir Gawain. Well, we go on here and we have a very lengthy description of the beauty of the lady. And so things are going on, by the way. They're feasting and celebrating, because remember now, this is the whole Christmas season. This is not just Christmas Day itself. And so over in 1046 and following, the lord of that land politely inquired what dire affair had forced him, Gowing, at that festive time so far from the king's court to fare forth alone ere the holidays wholly had ended in hall. So the Lord wants to know what errand or quest Gowing is on. It must be something very important to have taken him away from the festivities at Christmas time in Camelot. And so then we have 1068 or thereabouts. The Lord says, "Your search, sir, is done, for we shall see you to that site by the set time. Let Gowing grieve no more over the green chapel. You shall be in your own bed in blissful ease all the forenoon and fare forth the first of the year." So, for the next few days, you're going to lie around in the comfort of the castle, and particularly in the comfort of your bed, and rest up, and then we will direct you to the Green Chapel at the beginning of the new year. So, then we have in 1089, the Lord, the host, saying, or no, this is Gowing speaking. Let's see. "You have bound yourself boldly my bidding to do. Will you stand by that boast and obey me this once?" This is the host, sorry. "I shall do so indeed," said the doughty knight. "While I lie in your lodging, your laws will I follow." "As you have had," said the host, "many hardships abroad, and little sleep of late. You are lacking, I judge, both in nourishment, needful, and nightly rest. You shall lie abed late in your lofty chamber, tomorrow until Mass, and meet then to dine, when you will, with my wife, who will sit by your side, and talk with you at table, the better to cheer our guest. A-hunting I will go, while you lie late and rest." And so, then we have the game of the exchange of winnings being outlined. Now remember, in the general overall plot, in parts 1 and 4 of the romance, we have the beheading game. In between, in parts 2 and 3, we have a game within the game, and this is the exchange of winnings. The exchange of winnings. And so, the good host says, "And Gowing, agree now to this. Whatever I win in the woods, I will give to you at eve, and all you have earned, you must offer to me." And then he says, "Let the bright wine be brought, and we will drink on this, to seal our agreement." Well, okay. And then we begin part 3, the next morning. And we have all of the preparations for the hunt. And by the way, the descriptions of the hunt are justly famous for being so very detailed and even grisly in their details. And we learn a lot about medieval hunting here, much of which is corroborated by other sources, some of them literary, and also visual sources, pictorial sources, tapestries, paintings, and the like. And at the end of the first stanza of part 3, we have the echoing horns clear in the merry weather. And the first hunt is for a deer. And the deer attempts to protect itself by being what? What quality does the deer have to protect itself from its enemies? Here, human enemies. Any thoughts? What can a deer do? It can run. That's right. And the deer uses its speed and its agility to get away from the various enemies that might prey upon the deer. Okay, so here we have the deer skillfully trying to evade the hunters, but of course, eventually the deer is going to be brought down. In the meantime, what's going on inside the castle? In the stanza beginning in 1178, so the lord in the linden wood leads the hunt. That's the lord of the castle. And Gowing, the good knight in gay bed lies, and so forth. And so what happens here? Slyly there comes a little din at his door, and the latch lifted, and he holds up his heavy head out of the clothes. A corner of the curtain he caught back a little, and waited there warily to see what befell. Lo, it was the lady, loveliest to behold, that drew the door behind her deftly and still, and was bound for his bed. Abashed was the knight, and laid his head low again in likeness of sleep. Well, he, like the deer outside, is going to try to elude her by being quick and agile. Well, we'll see. He says, or she says at the beginning of the next stanza, "Good morning, Sir Gowing," said that gay lady, "a slack sleeper you are, to let one slip in. Now that you are taken in a trice, a truce we must make, or I shall bind you in bed, of that be assured." Thus, laughing lightly, that lady jested. "Good morning, good lady," said Gowing the blithe. "Be it with me as you will. I am well content, for I surrender myself and sue for your grace, and that is best, I believe, and behooves me now." Now notice he's caught in kind of a bind here. He can't let things go too far, or he's going to betray the host. I mean, what if he actually goes to bed with the lady, right? He would be betraying his host, and that would be a very serious violation of the rules of courtesy indeed. I mean, to say nothing of the moral code at the moment, but certainly the social laws of courtesy. He's a guest in this house. On the other hand, he has to obey the laws of courtesy in dealing with the lady, so he doesn't want to offend her. It's interesting that therefore he's caught in a kind of bind. And so he says, "But if, lovely lady, you misliked it not, and were pleased to permit your prisoner to rise, I should quit this couch," this bed, "and accoutre me better, and be clad in more comfort for converse here." If you would, absent yourself so that I could get dressed, and then we could sit around and have a nice conversation. And she says, "You shall not rise from your bed." And notice that he's trapped because he's undressed. I mean, he can't just bound out of bed, right? Because that too would be a violation of the code. "You shall not rise from your bed. I direct you better. I shall hem and hold you on either hand." So apparently she's holding him down now. I mean, not that he wouldn't be stronger than her. I mean, after all, he's one of the great knights of the Round Table. But he's not going to use his strength against the lady, because that too would be a violation of the rules. And see how the rules are being used here to hem him in and put him in a virtually impossible predicament? And keep company a while with my captive knight. For as certain as I sit here, Sir Gawain, you are, whom all the world worships, whereso you ride, your honor, your courtesy are highest acclaimed by lords and by ladies, by all living men. And lo, we are alone here, and left to ourselves. My lord and his liegemen are long departed, the household asleep, my handmaids too, the door drawn and held by a well-driven bolt. And since I have in this house him whom all love, I shall while the time away with mirthful speech at will. My body, I mean, she's not just going to carry on mirthful speech, apparently. My body is here at hand, your each wish to fulfill, your servant to command, I am and shall be still. Well, I mean, this is as direct as can be. I mean, she's obviously offering herself to Sir Gawain. Well, still, he obviously wants to find some graceful way and courteous way out of his predicament. And so finally, she has said, this is over in lines 1297 and following. So good a knight as Gowing is given out to be, and the model of fair demeanor and manners pure, had he lain so long at a lady's side, would have claimed a kiss by his courtesy through some touch or trick of phrase at some tale's end. Said Gowing, good lady, I grant it once. And so he gives her a quick kiss. Okay, and of course receives a quick kiss from her. And then she presumably is satisfied, at least for the time being. And so then that's that. We next go back to the hunt outside, and we have the cleaning and dressing of the animals killed. And this is where the details get pretty grisly. I'm looking at 1335 and following. The neck they neatly parted, the weazen from the windpipe, and cast away the guts. At the shoulders with sharp blades they showed their skill, boning them from beneath, lest the sides be marred. They breached the broad breast and broke it in twain, and again at the gullet they begin with their knives, cleave down the carcass clear to the breach. 2 tender morsels they take from the throat. Then round the inner ribs they rid off a layer and carve out the kidney fat close to the spine, hewing down to the haunch that all hung together, and held it up whole and hacked it free, etc. Well, I mean, they're very skillfully cutting up the animals and dressing the meat, as it were. Well, then we have, in the stanza that begins in 1372, the host now is back with his men in the hall, and Gowing has come, and so we have the exchange of winnings. And the host says to Gowing, here, you may have the winnings that I made today on the hunt, and those winnings consist of the venison. And now, Sir Gowing, what have you won during this day? And so he goes over and does what? He gives the host a kiss. Okay. Well, that's the exchange of winnings. And then we have the second day of hunting. And on this second day, the beast who is going to be sought is what? What's the second animal being hunted?
Boar.
A boar. Okay, a boar, right. Okay, a boar is a much more dangerous animal than a deer, isn't it? I mean, the boar will sooner or later stand and fight, especially if the boar has been cornered. And the boar can tear apart dogs, and if the boar gets a hold of a human being, could tear apart a human as well. So the boar is very, very dangerous and will fight back. Now notice that there's a symmetry or parallelism that you've probably noticed between the hunts in the woods outside and the hunts in the bedroom inside. The first day, the host is hunting deer outside. On the first day, the lady is hunting Gowing as if he were a deer, and that's how he behaves on the inside. The second day, the host is hunting a boar on the outside, a much more dangerous beast, and Gowing inside, when hunted by the lady, is much more boar-like in his resistance. So we're back to the bedroom. And this is in the, most of the way down the stanza that begins in 1454. We're back to Gowing's bedroom. And this time, the lady says in 1501 and following, "I am yours to command, to kiss when you please. You may lay on as you like and leave off at will." With this, the lady lightly bends and graciously gives him a kiss. The two converse as friends of love's trials and bliss. Well, we go on, and she chides him, says, you know, is this really Sir Gowing, who is the great and courteous knight, and who not only would be expected to be a great warrior, but also a lover as well? Well, he is able to resist her and only has a couple of kisses. Then we're back in the woods again in 1558 and following for a very fierce fight with the boar. And then we have another detailed, realistic description of the dressing of the animal. That's in 1601 and following. And then over in 1635 and following, we have the second exchange of winnings. And the host turns over the boar to Gowing, and Gowing gives the host the kisses that he received, a couple of kisses. Then we have the third day of hunting. What's the animal on the third day being hunted outside? Yes.
The fox.
The fox, and how does a fox defend itself? Yeah, go ahead.
Evasion.
Yeah, evasion. The fox is quick, but the fox is also sly and tricky, right? I mean, we even have the proverbial expression, sly like a fox, right? The fox is tricky. The fox can evade the hunters by performing all kinds of little dodges and tricks. So also Sir Gowing on the third morning when the lady attempts to hunt him. So, on the third day, we have in 1740, she has come in now, with her face and her fair throat freely displayed, her bosom all but bare, and her back as well. Well, that's not quite what the original says. The original says that her breast bara before, her breast is bare in front, and behinda ek, and the back also. So this is a very interesting dress, by the way. It's hard to imagine what there is of this dress. It seems to be a dress without a front and without a back, but it has sides, whatever that may mean and however you can imagine that. No doubt caught in at the waist by some sort of a belt or cincture, or as we find a girdle, cognate with the word kirtle, by the way. Well, Gowing has had very grim and horrible dreams. And so he's become fearful now. What's going to happen to him? He's about to be called upon to go out and meet the Green Knight. And so then we find out in 760, 678, that he was in great peril, you know, by the seductive advances or from the seductive advances of the lady, unless the Blessed Virgin Mary were to protect her knight, because this time the lady actually gets into bed under the covers with him. Well, okay, so it takes supernatural intervention to save him at this point from the lady's advances. Well, okay, she asks for a gift. He declines to give one. She offers a ring. He declines to take a ring from her. And then she offers to him in 1829 a girdle, her green girdle. And he at first declines to take it, but she explains to him the magical power of the green girdle. This is in the stanza that begins in 1846. And so before that stanza is over, he takes it. Why? Because he's afraid. Because he's afraid. And so then in the following stanza, he goes to confession to the priest. Then we're back outside for the fox hunt. Again, the gory details of the stripping of the meat from the body of the animal and the dressing of the flesh. And then we have the third exchange of winnings. But in this case, what does Gowing not give to the host that he has won? The girdle, right, the girdle. He holds that back because he's going to use that to try to save himself. And so then we have the conclusion of the work in the last part, in which he is going to go out. Again, we have the arming of the knight. He goes out, his guide gives him another temptation. Look, Gowing, take off, and I'll never let anybody know about it, and you will save yourself. But he presses on until he gets to the Green Chapel, and there he meets the Green Knight in all of his fearsomeness and has to bow down before the Green Knight's axe. And we'll pick up with this again after we take another intermission.